Welcome to Elevated Systems. I'm your host CJ, and today I'll be taking a look at the Anker PowerConf C300 Full HD Smart Webcam. This is a 1080p 60 FPS webcam. It has a 115-degree field of view, stereo microphones, and is AI powered. The AI powered functions include low light correction, smart auto framing, instant autofocus, and face tracking, and are enabled through the AnkerWork software. The MSRP for the webcam is $129 US, but at the time of filming is being offered with a $20 coupon, bringing it to $109. Now, to test this webcam and its AI-powered features, I connected it to the 2021 iMac, which will allow me to directly compare it to the iMac's built-in smart webcam, and I'll also be using a dumb or non-AI but inexpensive generic 1080p webcam for comparison. All the footage will be captured using OBS at 1080p 30 FPS using the high quality preset. Before I get into the function of the webcam, let's look at some of the physical features and the installation and function of the AnkerWork software. As far as the physical features that I haven't already mentioned, first included with the webcam is a user manual that includes 21 different languages, a 5-foot USB-C to USB-C cable, and a USB-C to USB-A adapter, and 2 optional adhesive lens covers which can be attached to the webcam. The webcam can be attached to most monitors using the attached clip, set on a desk, or attached to a tripod with a 1/4-inch thread. Finally, it features a recessed USB-C connection port, which is a nice feature. It takes the stress off the USB-C cable as the webcam is tilted and rotated. Now, this camera is plug and play ready and can be used without the AnkerWork software at its default settings. However, to use the full feature set, you will need the AnkerWork app. The AnkerWork software can be downloaded from the Anker website and is available for both PC and Mac. Once the software was installed, I connected the webcam using the USB cable. If you don't have an available USB-C port, you can use the included USB-A adapter. The AnkerWork app immediately recognized the C300. In order to use all the included features, most notably the HDR feature, I had to update the webcam's firmware, which was simple to do in the AnkerWorks app. Okay, I'll get into all these settings in more detail in a bit, but first I want to do some side-by-side comparisons of the 3 cameras, so you get CJ times 3. On the left of the screen is the iMac FaceTime camera, in the middle is the Anker PowerConf C300, and on the right is the generic 1080p $40 webcam. I included the FaceTime camera not as a direct competitor to the Anker camera, as it's built into a $1,300 computer with all the image processing being done directly by the system. I included it just for an ideal image quality comparison, and I included the $40 camera as a you get what you pay for example. It's just bad. Everything is washed out and softened to the point where I kind of look like a pink cartoon character. So take a good look at an example of bad one last time, because I don't really have to say anything else about it. And double CJ is easier to look at anyway. Now for this comparison, we're going to look at lighting and contrast, color accuracy, and overall image quality. So first for lighting, I'm in a well-lit room. Immediately to my right is a window, so I have natural daylight but not direct sunlight. Above me are 2 LED ceiling lights. These lights are slightly on the warm side at about 3,500 degrees Kelvin, and about 60 degrees to my front left is a studio softbox with a cool white light at about 5,500 Kelvin. So first for lighting and contrast, you can see the iMac camera has really good lighting distribution. You can see the right side of my face is more intensely lit from that window, while the left side is less so, as it's only receiving indirect light scattering from the white wall next to me. The contrast is clear. The details and shadows in my face are well defined, but they're not really exaggerated. You can pretty clearly make out the gray pattern in my shirt. Even the different levels of shadowing on the wall behind me are well contrasted. Now, the Anker lighting is also pretty good and just slightly more evened out. You can still see the window side of my face is more intensely lit, but you can also see the brightness level is more evenly distributed across the entire image. So my face is more, well, evenly lit in the image than it is in reality. This is most apparent in my shirt, where it's clear that the iMac camera, this shoulder is really the point of peak brightness in the image. That peak level of lighting is less noticeable in the Anker image, and the contrast is also slightly softer. However, there are still good levels of detail in my face. The gray pattern in my shirt is distinguishable, as well as the textured wall behind me. Let's look at color accuracy. And again, the iMac image is a good depiction of accurate colors. You see here on the back wall where the light from the window is blocked by the bookcase, the warmer light from the ceiling light is very noticeable. And as you move over here, the natural window light is more dominant. This is still somewhat apparent in the Anker cam. However, just like the lighting, the white point is more evenly distributed across the image. There's also more of a red tint to the Anker image. You can see that here on the wall where you definitely get a red hue. This is also very apparent in my skin tone. The iMac image is a good representation of my actual skin tone. It's summer. I got a bit of a tan. The Anker image looks a little too pale and pink, more like I do in the dead of winter. As far as overall image quality, the Anker does have good noise reduction. The image isn't noisy or grainy, but you do see some overall softening of the image. All right, now let's look at just the raw, unedited audio and video from the Anker PowerConf C300, and we'll get to how the different device settings work. But first, the audio, because unfortunately there are no audio settings in the AnkerWork software, so you're limited to the system settings. So for this test, I do have the input volume set to -5 dB in OBS. Now, I have listened to some test recordings, and to me, the audio sounds over amplified and has a fair amount of digital distortion and a lot of reverb, which is not great considering I am in a sound treated studio. There are two microphones in the camera, but they don't seem to offer any left and right channel separation. However, if I turn on my air conditioner sitting right here next to me, the noise rejection seems to be pretty good because the AC unit right here is pretty loud. And as I'm silent with the AC running, I get 0 dB on my audio input monitor. Okay, let's jump into the AnkerWork settings. First is resolution, and if say you have poor internet connection, you can reduce the resolution to compensate to 360p or 720p would probably be a better option, all the way up to 1080p. The frame rate selection, or FPS, while 30 FPS is fine for most applications and is the limit for some apps like Zoom, then you have the option for 60 FPS to get that snappier video look. Moving on to the angles in the frame, this camera does have a native field of view of 115 degrees, and then you can digitally zoom and crop into 90 degrees or 78 degrees. Now, with any digital zoom, you will lose a bit of quality and detail, and that is noticeable here as we're punched into 78 degrees. Now for the flexible angles, auto frame and solo frame essentially do the same thing. I'll start with solo frame since I'm running solo here, and you should see that it'll zoom in and crop in on me to keep me centered in the frame. And as I move across that 115 degree field of view, it will again zoom and crop in to keep me somewhat centered in the frame. I move to this side. There it is. It'll zoom in and crop in on me. Should recenter me in the frame. Okay. Auto frame essentially does the same thing, but auto frame will keep everybody. If there are multiple people in the frame, it'll keep everybody in the frame. Solo frame will just keep the person closest to the camera in the frame. Okay, now moving on to HDR. HDR here is not true high dynamic range of filming profile. It's more like this camera's low light compensation that'll adjust the brightness and contrast and color profile to a degree of the image in low light situations. So in a well lit situation like this, you won't see really any change. But also keep in mind, when HDR is enabled, you are limited to just 30 FPS. Now, I'll be testing HDR in different lighting, but first, I want to check out the autofocus. So first, let me just grab this can and change the focal point. Now, this is face recognizing autofocus, so it might take a minute. There you go, second to get in on that can. And now, let's see how fast it can find my face. That was quick. That was quick. Let's try that again. Change the focal point to a close. Okay. Got the focal point changed this time. Let's try it on a moving target as I move back. That was, again, really quick. Autofocus is on this is really snappy and is probably faster than my studio camera autofocus is. Now I've attached the camera to a tripod and I'm going to test the camera in different lighting situations with HDR on and HDR off. So again, this is the well-lit studio situation. This is with HDR on and this is with HDR off. You can see that HDR back on, HDR does make those colors a little more vibrant here. Now let me go ahead and turn off the overhead light. And here with HDR on, you can see the camera did compensate a little by adjusting the white point. So again, we have that just kind of even lighting from the two light sources that are about the same temperature. Now this is HDR on. Let's turn HDR off. Again, got a little darker, a little less vibrant. Again, HDR on, HDR off. All right, let me turn off the front light. Now the main light illuminating is the window off to my right here. And again, we see HDR off, HDR on. Again, brightened, a little more vibrant, a little better contrast. HDR off and HDR on. All right, now I've closed the window, so the only thing illuminating me from the front is the display itself. Tried to block off most of the RGB lighting behind me. This is with HDR on, and I can see that it's really, really softened the image a bit. Let me go ahead and turn HDR off. And I'm gonna have to say that just at a first glance, that actually looks like a clearer picture. I get more detail, more contrast, HDR on. Again, it's punched up the vibrancy, but it's eliminated a lot of the detail and made it really soft. So HDR off. I'm gonna say HDR off in a really low lit situation is better in this case. Last is me, really brightly backlit by the open window. This is with HDR off. Let's go ahead and turn HDR on. I guess that compensated, but kind of in a strange way. I've got a very, very distinct edge rimming around me, which is kind of a weird look. So again, HDR off. Okay, so you got that really bright backlight, a lot brighter than it actually is. And then HDR on. And now you got some kind of weird cartoony look to me again. All right, so the last thing I'm doing is testing that auto framing as I move within that 115 degree field of view between 1 and 6 feet from the camera. So it's already cropped and zoomed in on me here in the center of the frame as I move to one direction. It brings me in as I'm at the edge of that 115-degree field of view as I move in. Again, it'll center on me again. As I move out of frame. Okay, as I come back into frame. That one found me pretty quickly. Okay, I think that was plenty of demo for you to make up your own minds about this webcam. However, I'll conclude with what I think the pros and cons of the webcam are. I'll start with the pros. The first being the 115-degree field of view. Most webcams in this class and price point, like the Logitech C922, have a native field of view of around 78 degrees. The wider field of view is great for multiple person video conferencing or any situation where you need more area in your shot, like a conference room or a classroom. Next is the 60 FPS frame rate. This isn't necessary for most people, but again, there are few webcams in this class that offer 60 FPS at 1080p. Some, like the C922, have 60 FPS, but only at 720p. Next plus point, saved settings. Once you close the AnkerWork software, the settings are saved to the camera. Number 4, voice isolation and noise reduction. The background noise elimination, besides the air conditioner test, almost the whole time I was filming, there was a circular saw running outside just at the house behind me, and from the playback I've done, I didn't hear it at all. Next to last, the auto framing. While there are cameras out there that employ mechanical features like gimbals and motors to track a subject, those are typically much more expensive. And of course, there are applications like NVIDIA Broadcast that have those features. However, if you don't have a system that supports those applications or just don't want to expend system resources, this is an affordable option for that functionality. And finally, most importantly, video quality, which I thought was great. The image was sharp despite the noise reduction. Lighting and contrast were well balanced and only very slightly overexposed, but by no means washed out. Colors were a bit muted and had a very slightly red tint, but were more defined and vibrant than other webcams I've seen in this class. And the image quality through differing levels of lighting was pretty consistent, with the exception of that bright backlit window that was problematic. Now let's talk cons, and first for me is the audio quality. Despite the noise reduction, or probably due to it, there was quite a bit of digital distortion and too much reverb. Also, having two microphones, one on each side of the camera, but no stereo separation of the sound, is a bit disappointing, as this can be beneficial, especially in a conference type setting. Next is the AnkerWork software, specifically the lack of basic image quality settings. Adding adjustments for white balance, exposure, hue, temperature, and even noise reduction level would make it much better, as well as some basic sound settings, specifically being able to adjust the noise cancellation level. In many cases, I'd prefer a little background noise as opposed to the digital distortion that's a result of heavy noise cancellation. Next point, value. Is it worth the cost? Personally, I think the current discounted price of $109 is the perfect price point, but the regular price of $129 is just a little bit high. Not for what you get, but more for where it fits in with the competition. There are top-selling webcams on the market that sell for under $100 that, despite lacking some of the features of the Anker C300, have very equivalent video quality at 1080p 30 FPS. Finally, who is this webcam for? Well, first, if you're just looking for a webcam that you can clip to your display for 1080p or 720p 30 FPS headshots for your Zoom or WebEx calls, then while this is great for that, it's probably a bit advanced for your needs. Anyone else, podcasters, streamers, presenters, teachers, anyone who would benefit from the advanced features I outlined and demonstrated, this is the most affordable solution I'm aware of, but if you know of a comparable solution, let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that like before you click over here to subscribe and over here for more videos. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe.